So, hello, everybody. Welcome to this C Notes podcast. I'm Kevin Sullivan. We have a special guest with us today. Our guest is John Bandler. John Bandler is an attorney in New York City, former district attorney and former law enforcement. John has also written a new book, and we're going to talk about his book. We're going to talk about John. We're going to talk about some of the things that are important to investigators in the land of cybercrime. So with that, I'm going to introduce John. So John, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and how you got to this point?
Kevin, thank you. It's great to be on your show. It's been an interesting journey. I think both of us have had interesting paths in government and after government. But, for me, college, studied science and computer science. And then I was like, I want to get away from that. And I got interested in policing, applied to policing jobs. As you know, I was fortunate to get hired by the New York State Police. We worked in adjoining stations, upstate New York. So about 4 years in the state police, I decided to go to law school part-time, able to graduate law school and get a great job working for Robert Morgenthau at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office.
The legend.
A legend, just passed away not too long ago, but he built a tremendous office where, prosecutors focusing on justice, doing what's right. And I was able to work in that office for 13 years. And when I was a young prosecutor, I got drafted into a new unit that was formed, the identity theft unit. But the cases were interesting and involved a lot of legwork, a lot of records, and it also tied into cybercrime. And I happened to fall into this enormous cybercrime case. It started with a report of identity theft, but you pull the thread and it keeps unraveling. And all of a sudden, it's this huge cybercrime case spanning the globe and involving virtual currency and all these things I had never heard of. That case went on, finished. I founded a cybercrime intelligence unit there. And eventually I left the DA's office. I started my own law firm and consulting practice, focusing on cybersecurity, information governance, and investigations, of course, Cybercrime Investigations. I was able to write a book on cybersecurity and now finished up a book on Cybercrime Investigations. And that brings us to the present day here on your podcast. I've caught you up in 2 minutes.
All right. I guess we should tell the audience that, as you mentioned, we both work for the state police. I know people refer to New York City as folks refer to as upstate, but we worked out of Middletown and Monroe, which is kind of the suburbs of New York City. And we were there in the early 90s. And funny, interesting how you say you kind of wandered into this DA's office and didn't know anything about the ID theft and cybercrimes and kind of got pulled into it and turned into something wonderful for yourself. And I have the same thing with money laundering. It wasn't my plan 25 years ago to get involved in money laundering. And I kind of just stepped in it, and next thing I know, the doors opened up. So kind of interesting how that works that way. But so why don't you tell us? So you wrote a couple of books on cybercrime, with this latest one being Cybercrime Investigations. Why don't you tell us a little bit, what exactly is cybercrime?
Cybercrime, simply, it's using a computer to commit crime or using the internet to commit crime. Mm-hmm. Now, it seems we put cyber in front of every word today, but cybercrime, I think what we want to focus on is cybercrime for profit. And you talk about how you got pulled into the AML world. Investigating the cybercrime case, I got pulled into anti-money laundering also because a lot of cybercrime is for profit. Mm-hmm. Good cyber criminals earn a lot of money, and they need to move the money and they need to launder the money.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something for AML folks to focus on. Now, a lot of cybercrime, it's about theft. It's about stealing something. It's about making money from that theft. And there's this huge cybercrime economy and lots of different participants doing their own acts. And of course, they're doing it to make money. So ultimately, it's about theft, it's about payments, it's about moving that money, laundering the money. And, I should highlight something important about cybercrime, which it's a type of crime where the criminal can commit the crime from a different country. They can make money from a different country. So that's something new. For you and I being cops in the 90s, a lot of the theft we investigated, a burglary, a theft, a larceny, the perpetrator had to be in the physical proximity of the victim. Now we have this crime where individuals are making thousands, millions of dollars. Collectively, this theft is billions of dollars, and they're doing it from a different country. And that means they need to move that money out. So I think that's something to take away. One more takeaway, one more point to highlight is...
Well, just good to know these things, AML and cybercrime are joined at the hip.
Definitely. Another unique aspect of cybercrime is, I think, the amount of crimes being committed versus the number of people being brought to justice. The ratio is terrible. So if you look at burglary, I think the arrest rate is about 10%, which sounds pretty terrible, but we're actually pretty safe in our homes and businesses. The solve rate for cybercrime, I don't think there's even good statistics for it, but it's going to be a fraction of a percent. And that's something we need to do more about.
Well, do you think that the technology is moving faster than the laws concerning cybercrime?
Certainly technology moves faster than laws. So technology changes every week, every day. Laws are slower to develop, and that's the way it should be. We don't want laws being crafted hastily. We want thought. We want some time. I don't think that lag is the problem, though. There's laws on the books that say don't steal. There's laws on the books that say don't breach someone's networks or computers, don't steal or possess stolen personal identifying information. So we have those laws. I think the challenge is applying those laws, that we're not doing a good enough job investigating and enforcing those laws that are on the books to bring these cyber criminals to justice.
Do you think we need more law enforcement? Well, first of all, who actually investigates the cybercrime?
There's a broad spectrum of people and organizations and sectors that investigate cybercrime. So if we look at the big picture, there's about three main sectors that are involved with cybercrime investigation. You get the public sector through law enforcement, and that's what we think of most, right? Law enforcement, they're the only people that can arrest a cyber criminal, bring them to justice. So law enforcement's big. The private sector investigates cybercrime too. They have to. It's a regulatory requirement now. So if a financial institution is attacked, if any organization is attacked by a cybercrime, they have to do some sort of investigation. They have to report that to victims, to regulators. The third sector is regulators. They're regulating. They're making sure this investigation is appropriate, the reporting is done. So if you look at each of those sectors and then you break it down further, who's doing this investigation? It's not just people with the title of investigator. It's police officers, detective investigators, special agents, yes. It's also prosecutors, attorneys, general counsel, analysts, paralegals, forensic examiners, financial analysts.
Wow.
So it's just a lot of job descriptions, a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different skills.
One of the myths surrounding money laundering has always been that to investigate money laundering, you need to be an accountant. And I used to tell people that, nothing is further from the truth. And the examples I used to give was, if you want to be a narcotics investigator, you don't have to be a chemist. If you want to be a homicide investigator, you don't have to be a forensic pathologist. But I was just wondering, in the case of cybercrimes, do you need to be some kind of tech wizard to understand and investigate cybercrimes?
Absolutely not. It takes different people, different skill sets, different backgrounds. I've seen tech wizards who were poor cybercrime investigators. I've seen people who are really bad at tech who are great cybercrime investigators. So there's just a lot of skill sets involved. Good cybercrime investigator, they're going to bring their own skill sets and they're going to seek to broaden their knowledge. So here's an example. I was weak on accounting and financial investigation. And when I was doing this big cybercrime case, I did ultimately have a financial investigator come and help school me on accounting 101 and how transactions are properly recorded. But it takes a lot of knowledge. So one great thing about our book is if you are not a tech wizard, or if technology, computers, the internet intimidates you, we've got a chapter for you that can give that basic knowledge so that you can have an intelligent conversation with that digital forensics expert, with that tech expert, because it takes all these different skills. Following the money, how to identify a cyber criminal, what the laws are. Even if you're a tech wizard, you need to know those other things also.
So if I was a complete novice in cybercrimes and I want to investigate it, would your book be a good place to start out?
It's a great place to start. It covers all the main important areas. If you're a tech wizard and you need to know more about the law, the book's got it. If you don't know tech and need to know more about technology, how cyber crimes are committed, the book's got that. It's comprehensive, it's holistic, and it puts it all together.
I'm already going to make sure I want my autographed copy.
Definitely.
So how does somebody who might be brand new to this field, because I get that call all the time, how do I become an AML investigator? And I assume you might probably get the calls on, how do I become a cybercrime investigator? So what things should somebody do to try to follow that dream?
To become an investigator, I think you need skills and knowledge. Now, to become an investigator, there's different routes to get in there through the public sector, such as a job in law enforcement, or the private sector, all these consulting companies that offer investigation services from the private side. You got to build your skills and knowledge. At the top of the list for that, I would put integrity, diligence, organizational abilities. If you don't have integrity, nothing you investigate is going to come out well.
Right.
Diligence, you can't overlook stuff. You got to turn over every stone. It takes a broad list of skills, cybercrime, the typologies, why people do it. Mostly cybercrime for profit, not exclusively though. Some technical knowledge on computers, networks, knowing something about information security, knowing the law, because you don't want to violate the law. That's not good for anybody. And you want to know how to hold cyber criminals accountable.
So you mean it just unlike on TV where you see the TV cop hacking into the CIA headquarters and getting information? I see a couple of dopey cop shows on that all the time. So it's not like that.
The shows on cybercrime, they never seem to quite hit the mark. And there's always someone at the keyboard in the secret database. And
the secret database, that's right. It has all the information about everybody all the time.
And they just know how to find it and everything's solved.
Yeah.
And there's
Hollywood
lots
investigations.
Definitely. How to organize the investigation, how to analyze the data, writing skills, how to do open source investigation. For law enforcement, we've got a neat process we outline. We call it the simple process. Lets law enforcement, that police officer, take in the report from someone whose email account was hacked. What could they do? What's realistic for them to do? The financial investigation, the attribution, it takes all of those skills. Plus, what happens if this reaches the ultimate conclusion? If this winds up in court in a civil matter or a criminal matter, how can we do the investigation so that will play out well? I don't know if that answers your question, but it takes a lot of skills and different avenues for people to get in, and it's not probably going to be that job title that says Cybercrime Investigator. That's probably not going to be your first job.
Okay. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of similarities between the traditional investigations that you and I did as young state troopers that cybercrime is today. What you talked about, the due diligence and turning over stones and rattling trees and shaking doorknobs and keep on going. Sounds very similar to it.
Definitely. I think of my days as a trooper in Middletown, New York, a busy station. You get a lot
Yeah.
of people,
Yeah.
calling in the complaint of a burglary,
Hmm.
vandalism, something was stolen.
Yes.
And as a trooper, that case was yours until
Hmm.
you either were able to figure out who did it and make an arrest,
Hmm.
or you were able to show to the supervisor that you took enough steps to try to solve it and that it was just not solvable. Yeah, like you said, it meant knocking on doors and asking people if they saw anything,
Hmm.
interviewing witnesses, interviewing suspects,
Hmm.
checking the computers to see if there's anything available through those databases. But a lot of it is talking to people and visiting places. And with any investigation, there may be 20 stones you got to turn over, and maybe all 20 have nothing underneath, but maybe one of them has a clue that gets you to the next place.
Yeah, so it seems like if you just understand the basics of a quality investigation, that's a good start for whatever specialty you want to go after, whether it's money laundering or cyber crimes or fraud or what it might be. Just seems like having that basic skills was a godsend.
Definitely. And, it's about looking at your evidence and clues you have now, whether it's a person or records. In cybercrime, there's a lot of records.
Hmm.
And can you analyze that? Can you find any clues to take the next investigative step? And yeah,
Hmm.
diligence and doggedness and
Hmm.
carefulness.
Yeah. So we already mentioned the certain connections between AML and cybercrime, which it's obvious that they're connected at the hip with this. Certainly, I'm starting to see it in the AML world, a lot more cybercrime events, and I think now with the digital currency getting more pervasive, I think we're going to see a lot more of that also. Probably not a bad idea for those people involved in money laundering to start getting a knowledge of cybercrime investigations.
Definitely. When you look at a crime like cybercrime that's mostly for profit, that
Hmm.
requires moving illegal profits from one country to another,
Right.
that targets the financial institutions and financial system, targets customers of financial institutions. It's really something that AML world is ideally suited to
Hmm.
investigate and help combat. AML, it's about investigating, detecting, reporting on illegal activity and profits.
Hmm. Right.
It's about protecting the financial sector, maintaining its integrity.
Hmm.
So I think AML should be at the forefront of cybercrime investigation. You
Yeah.
mentioned virtual currencies.
Hmm.
Um, you know, just fascinating developments in virtual currencies. A lot of people don't realize e-gold was the first mainstream virtual currency invented in 1996. So virtual currencies have been around. They've evolved, and cyber criminals naturally are going to gravitate to online payment mechanisms, move that value.
So, John, just curious. I know you started mentioning it before. How did you come to write this book? Was there one particular case or something that just jumped out at you and said, "And I just got to share my knowledge with it," or something that sparked you?
So you could say this book sort of started in 2005 when I was drafted into that identity theft unit. My supervisor was Antonia Mirzon, who's the co-author of this book.
Okay.
And we fell into this big cybercrime case. Started small, pull
Hmm.
the thread, it becomes large. We call that the Western Express case because it involved a digital currency exchanger in Manhattan.
Hmm.
And the case spanned the globe. We're following money, virtual currency, bank wires, Western unions going around the globe. We're following the trafficking of stolen data between cyber criminals and identity thieves and what the identity thieves are doing with that stolen information. That case wraps up with a 4-month trial. The last 3 defendants would not plead guilty. They go to trial. That's their right. 4-month trial. They're convicted. Box that case up. Eventually, I leave the DA's office and I'm teaching in a few places about cybercrime, cybersecurity, cyber law. I wrote the book on cybersecurity, and then with my cyber law, I'm like, it'd be good to write a book on this since I'm developing this curriculum on it. Publisher said, I don't know about cyber law, but what about cybercrime investigations? We need a book like that. And I said, that sounds good. And it was natural to co-author that with Antonia, who, not only the experience of the Western Express case with me, but she supervised hundreds or thousands of other cases. So we collaborated on this new book, 2 years now almost. And now it's just about hitting the presses. We're really proud of it. And we got vignettes of Western Express throughout, but I think it's a good read too, as well as a helpful resource.
By the way, and we're going to put the information about your book up at the end here so everybody can look at it and read it and go out and buy it. So what will the book teach us? For some guy that knows nothing about it, wants to get involved in it, I buy this book, what's it going to teach me?
So it's broken into 4 main parts. So the first part is about understanding cybercrime, computers, and cybersecurity. Give that basic foundational knowledge. The next part is law for the cybercrime investigator. Covers fundamental principles, defining cybercrime, what law enforcement can use to get evidence, what if it leads to a nation state or terrorist, civil and regulatory issues. Part 3 is about the cybercrime investigation. So it starts by introducing these 3 perspectives: law enforcement, private sector, and regulators. Private sector, they're going to be the ones hit first, and hopefully they report it to law enforcement, who hopefully tries to catch these criminals.
Right.
Talks about investigation methods for both general and for each of those sectors. Financial investigation, we got a chapter devoted just to that. The science and art of attribution, which is identifying a cyber criminal. How do you prove that someone did something online? Kind of a philosophical question there, but we've got a chapter on that and a process for that. How do you apprehend the subject? Then we got the last part is on the litigation. So if you do a terrible investigation or terrible practices that are not going to make it into court because they were improper or not preserved well, what's the point? So we got a chapter on how this is going to play out in litigation, including some neat processes for getting evidence submitted. So it's a great read, I think, straight through. It's also modular. So each chapter and each section, if you're in the middle of an investigation and need to know one thing, it's there for you to find. So covers a lot of ground. Comprehensive, a good adjective for it.
Yeah, it sounds like the de facto book to get if you want to get involved in this stuff. So any takeaways for somebody who might want to buy the book?
Definitely. I think the one takeaway is we need more good cybercrime investigators. We need cybercrime investigators to improve their skills, and we need more. And this book is about that. We need cybercrime to be investigated, because any crime that's not investigated, it's not going to be solved.
Right.
We need more of these offenders to be brought to justice, because if there's no deterrence, if there's no consequences, there's a lot of people who are just going to keep committing the crimes. We got vignettes throughout it. Break it up. It's a good read straight through, but it's also organized well, so it's modular. You can find that part you need.
I don't want to keep you. I appreciate all the time you've given me here with this. So I'll just ask one last question here, and maybe the most important question of the day, John. I want to go out and buy your book. Where can I go out and buy this book, and how do I get it?
Great question. So you can start with the book website, which is cybercrimeinvestigationsbook.com. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it at the publisher site. So it's published by CRC Press. Their sister imprint is Routledge. All those links are on our website, cybercrimeinvestigationsbook.com.
Sounds outstanding. And just lastly, is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you?
So Cybercrime Investigations is important. We need to do it well. We got a great new book out there. Also important is cybersecurity. I got a book on cybersecurity too. A lot of us are working remotely. And my book on cybersecurity is Cybersecurity for the Home and Office. very apropos today. We want to protect ourselves from cybercrime, protect our families, protect our organization. There's a new law in New York State, the New York State SHIELD Act. It basically requires organizations in New York State to have reasonable cybersecurity. So we also want to prevent cybercrime before it happens.
Outstanding. All right, John, I want to thank you for your time here today, and even more so for writing this book I think it's going to really help a lot of people. It sounds like it's got everything in it that you need. I know I'm going to get it, but I want mine autographed though.
We'll
So
definitely
I'll run into you somewhere along the way and demand an autograph.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Okay. And to everyone out there, once again, this has been Kevin Sullivan on the AML C Notes podcast. Thanking my special guest, John Bandler. Please go out and buy his book, Cybercrime Investigations. And that wraps up this episode. Be on the lookout for the next episode of C Notes. If you'd like to climb aboard this AML ride-along, subscribe to my podcast. For those watching the video, click the Anti-Money Laundering Training Academy logo in the bottom right of the screen to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Anyone interested in picking up a copy of my book called Anti-Money Laundering in a Nutshell? It's available at Amazon or at finest stores in most cities and at lousiest stores in all cities. So for all AML advisory services, custom on-site or online training, and a growing catalog of live and on-demand webinar courses, please visit our website at amltrainer.com. That's it. Thank you. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.